right, what is going on, guys? It is time for another episode of the Chasing Waypoints podcast. And while we're on a roll, this time around, we're doing another in the Bivouac. Yeah, I forgot to, do the warm-up, right? All the do, re, mi, fa, sol, or whatever they do, all that's, nah. We just do this as it comes out. But we are in the Bivouac again. We have got another guest, two guests actually lined up, 2 for 1 special today. And I know you've heard of them, and I know you've seen the gear, and I know you've seen the bags. But we're going to find out a little bit about the brand and the people behind it and how this whole thing even got started. So we're going to be talking to Pete and Ash of Mosko Moto today. Find out a little bit more about the origins and their travel. I was down at the Mosko meetup with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago and got to see a presentation about all the travel and stuff that they've been doing. And these guys mean business. So I am absolutely stoked to have them this week on the Chasing Waypoints podcast. Episode number 71. All right. We're getting there. 29 more episodes before episode number 100. I think we're going to do that one live. I don't know. I'm going to start looking for some ideas. What to do for the 100th episode of the Chasing Waypoints podcast, which is crazy. I think thinking back, 70-ish episodes ago, I should say rambling on about a 850 and a 790 is really the more accurate description of it. But that's what we were doing. So you guys are going to be hearing this episode on Sunday. I'll let the cat out of the bag. We're not recording this on Sunday. But we are going to be traveling back from the Baja Rally and American Rally Originals fundraiser. So absolutely looking forward to sharing the stories and the experience and everything that went down for that event. So you guys will be hearing more about it. And I'm sure we're going to get a few more in the Bivouacs out of that one. But look for some updates on that. If you're not already following, make sure you follow at Chasing Waypoints on Instagram. Well, let's start turning down this party and get a link over to these guys and see if we get them logged in here in just a second. Checking out the teaser video on the Mosko Moto website. It's pretty cool. A friend I met down at San Diego BMW Motorcycles when I was working there, Wade, rider and all around nice guy. Got the chance to work with him there, work on his bikes, and help him with the process. And so reached out to me. We started talking Mosko Moto, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Obviously, we know, and I mean, there's some big production stuff that they do and some design stuff that they've done, and the brand is very big. The brand is everywhere. It's all around you. But now with the new gear lineup as well as the bags was the beginning, and now they're doing their Moto gear stuff. And we're going to have another in the Bivouac that we're going to be talking to somebody else on the team, talking a little bit about what the I should say. Oh, that was kind of abrupt. What happened to Smooth? Oh. So talking a little bit more about the gear and the layering and how they've gone about designing this Moto gear and seeing it in person, touching it, and really like studying it. It is some tough material stuff. Like this is not a light duty one season type of deal where you're going to wear it for a few months and then you're going to be looking for the next set of gear. So I'm stoked to find out more about that and what they've got going on. But anyway, with that being said, let's see if we got them on the line. Pete, Ash, you guys there?
Yep, we're here.
Yes, we are.
Nice. Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, really. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, the first question I have to ask, because this is, you never know, where in the world are you guys right now?
We're actually at home sitting on our couch right now. Yeah, we're surprisingly at home. It's the time of year where we're not here very much. Some years more than others, and it just feels like right now we're kind of cranking away, not really here very much. So yes, it's kind of a shocker.
We got 24 more hours and then we're on the planes to Flagstaff for Overland Expo.
Yep.
So almost every weekend is an event for us right now.
Wow. Well, that was actually where I talked a little bit. Actually, got to meet Ash in person for the first time. My girlfriend and I, and we were talking, books and all sorts of moto travel, and talking with Wade about how that schedule is and like what you guys are doing with the meetups and all of that stuff. Like, it seems like it really is one right after the other.
It is, because once we get that road rig on tour, once it's out traveling around, the big trailer you saw in the truck, and our team is out on the road, Ryan and Donzi and their son Roland living on the road full time. So once it's rolling, you want to kind of keep it rolling. Mm-hmm. So, you go, the events are laid out in a pattern that makes sense geographically for the truck and trailer. And so then it'll kind of go out on tour for a while and come back.
Yeah.
So
usually with a break in the middle, a little break in the middle in the summer.
Yeah. So it'll go do one tour in the spring and then another tour in the fall, usually, with a few isolated shows in between where we kind of go out and back.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I had no idea. I think it's an awesome concept. I mean, being able to, like literally put hands on gear, and just actually check everything out and talk about strap abuse, of course, so.
Well, it's really important for us because we're a direct company. We only sell direct. So we don't have dealers. We don't have distributors. So, the only way to really see our product in person is if a friend of yours has it, mm-hmm. Or someone you go riding with, or if you come visit us at one of these events.
Nice.
And I think we do as many or more events probably than anyone else in the ADV space in the US anyway. We're between 40 and 50 events a year.
Wow. Okay. So if you, I mean, that's not like per weekend, because I think you guys do during the week shows, but that's a busy schedule. It's a busy schedule.
And some of those shows are in Europe. And we also do usually a show in Australia, some shows in Canada. So it's spread out all over the world.
But mostly concentrated in US and EU.
Yeah, US and EU accounts for probably all but 3 or 4 of the shows. That's just part of doing business this way. And actually, we love it. Yeah. I mean, the travel is exhausting. It used to be just Ash and I, mm-hmm. but now we have, we were just driving all over the country in our little camper with a enclosed trailer behind. But now we have a whole team of folks that help us and are actually totally in charge of leading it. And we sort of drop in for events, the big ones,
Dude, that's awesome. Well, and I mean, I'm trying to think of like all of this traveling that's involved, just on the business side. But when we were there, and I did not know that you guys were going to be talking or we're going to have a presentation, and I'm absolutely stoked that we stayed. But this traveling thing goes before Mosko, right? What you guys were doing on motos and going to different countries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that travel is very deeply woven into the fabric of who we are, like for both of us, just being nomadic in some way or another. I think that for Pete, he has his story, starting with freight trains when he was 15 years old and moving around the country like that. And then motorcycle travel after, during college and after. Mm-hmm. And, for me, it was kind of the same. It was like during college without the freight train hopping. Still have yet to do that. I would do it though. I would do it. It sounds like a thrill. We have talked about it. We've talked about going back and sort of having a trip to re-enliven that memory.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. I tried hitchhiking once. I wasn't very convincing. The girl who picked us up was immediately like, "What are you doing?"
I have questions.
Yeah, sorry, I have questions.
Yeah.
But no, travel is a huge part of our lives either way. And so if we weren't doing these shows, I'm sure we would be doing some other type of travel, or even more of another type of travel.
The way we're flying into events right now is not really either one of our favorite ways to do it. I mean, we love travel, and flying is probably the least satisfying kind, of all the different ways to move yourself around.
Especially the short trips, we keep talking about it. This is like a topic very, very close to the forefront of our mind right now, because as we're doing it, it's just exhausting. Like when you go to a place and return within 36 hours, it's kind of like whiplash. You're not really, you're not there for very long. Your body has a lot of adjusting to do, going up into the air, coming back down. And yeah, it's really just kind of hard on the body. So
And you don't absorb anything. You just walk in to the airport in one climate and one region and walk out in another climate in another region without connecting the dots in any kind of like meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't get the sights, the warm up, the build up to arriving to it. It's just kind of like, okay, jump on a plane, get there, go back. I mean,
yeah.
I could see that for Vegas, because that way, at least from San Diego, you avoid the 6-hour drive or the 8-hour drive or 10-hour drive on the way back with everybody coming back. But for what you guys do, I mean, yeah, that gets tough for sure.
Yeah.
Just from one to the other. So what was the last moto trip that you guys did?
The very last one was Baja. Yeah, we were in Baja. We took we went with the entire Mosko team to Baja. So twice a year we close the office for a week, and the whole team goes riding together. Everybody on our team rides, which is cool. I think this last company trip we had 26 people with us. Some of those were partners and just friends who are close to the business, but still on the Europe side and on the US side, everybody on the team rides. Everybody has a bike, which is really cool. And so twice a year we kind of close the office and we all go riding together, and we use the gear and hang out. And it's just like a really neat thing. We started doing it in the very beginning when we founded the company. And at that time, we were using our own personal bikes as the show bikes. So, when we're doing a show, we got to have something in the booth to hang the bags off of. Mm-hmm. And the only bikes we owned were our own personal ones. So we took those to events, and then, the event would be over and we'd be somewhere else with the bikes. And it was just like a perfect opportunity if we're in Southern California, Arizona, to pop across the border into Baja, or if we're near the Rockies to go to Moab. And that was how company trips started, was we had our bikes, we're somewhere far away from home, so let's all go riding together. But there were like 3 of us, or 4 of us. And I think we always kind of felt like as the company grew, we'd have to move away from that, like how it wouldn't work, that it would just be too many different skill levels and bikes and the risk and all these different things. Mm-hmm. But actually, we're still doing it, and it just seems to keep getting better and better. Like the trips are so fun, and they're not guided tours, they're totally disorganized and chaotic in all the good ways, Everybody's really on a trip. We have breakdowns, we have injuries, people get lost. We don't all try to ride together. Everybody splits up. There's no, once we're out there, there's no hierarchy. It's just, everybody riding together, just like a bunch of friends. And it's pretty cool, man. Yeah.
It's really easy to sit on the couch and think about all the problems with it. Like when you're not on the trip, like, oh gosh, we have so many people now. Well, it's just going to be a pain in the butt. Like, how do you even pull something like this off? Again, what about injuries and
crossing borders,
liabilities and crossing borders? And what about riding through the city? Are people going to get hurt? And, it's really easy in that moment that you're coming up with all the problems to forget about how valuable it is. Mm-hmm. Like when you cross all of these boundaries together and all of these barriers, and you're out on a trip and you're like disconnected and then reconnected, and like the joy of that is just so powerful. And traveling together, we come back and then the people who are answering the phones, our rider support team, they have these stories. And of course, in addition to their own motorcycle trips that they go on, but they have these stories to call on when they're talking to other riders in the community about questions or advice that they might need. I just think I don't even know how we could possibly measure the value of it. It's like those Amex commercials. Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy thing to do, though. I mean, if you talk to some kind of risk manager or insurance adjuster, I'm sure they would think we're absolutely insane. And,
Totally.
Here we go.
It is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Now, you want to do what?
Yeah.
How many people?
Yeah.
No, exactly.
I have questions.
We've been around that with the insurance company. Our team trips are kind of like team building trips, like going to a ropes course or something like that. That's how it's considered under the insurance policy. Yeah. And that seems so far so good, but it's an awesome thing. And it's totally baked into the DNA of our company.
So was that really our last trip? Sorry, I'm like,
no.
Our last trip was really
I don't know. So that was our last big trip. That was our last trip, like living off the bikes and being gone for a material period of time. But we did a couple content missions.
Yeah, we did. We came back Yeah, the hub riding on the way back from Rawhide.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so we drove back from the Rawhide event in the Mojave, with our van and bikes on the back. And we stopped at 3 or 4 different spots on the way back from California to Washington State and rode, single track and dual sport, which was super fun. And then before that, we got back from Africa. So we were only home from Africa for like 6 days when we left for Baja.
That was crazy.
Which was a crazy turnaround. In fact, so I started the year on the California SoCal BDR buddies. Came back from that, was barely unpacked when we took off for Africa. We were in Africa for a month and then came back for 6 days. And then we turned around and went to Baja. We were in Baja. The total trip to Baja was about 10 days because of the drive down and back in addition to the riding.
Was it? I feel like it was even a little longer than that for us because we like kind of took our time on the way back home.
and then we turned around and went down to Rawhide and then
and then it's just like events, boom, like time for events.
Yeah, wow, yeah. Event season started up.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say event season started up.
That's it.
That's it. And you just kind of get pulled into it in a really, I mean that in the best way, like get sucked in. Like last weekend, I wasn't supposed to go to Arizona for this event. I said, no, I'm going to take the weekend off and not go to an event. And then when it came down to it, like 3 days before I booked, and I ended up going because I don't know, once the momentum gets going, you kind of want to just be in it. Like you don't want to miss out. And we're also like sort of re-envisioning what our next phase of meetups look like. So that is a really fun process. It's something that I care a lot about. And I think it's just really fun for us to all kind of toss around the ideas of what it might look like in the future to start incorporating some riding like we did at this event. So this was like this was a little testing pool, this Bisbee event last weekend. And it went so great. I mean, it was unbelievable. The difference is just huge. Like if you went to a normal meetup and you went to one of these, I don't know that I would go to a normal meetup. Like it's just that it's so much more valuable time with people. No one's like rushed.
The challenge we've always had with meetups is that they happen in kind of urban areas during the week. So people aren't really likely to kind of want to ride 3 hours out of town and camp for the night because they got to go to work the next day. So this is our first test of a weekend meetup. Like a multi-day. Yeah.
So I didn't catch. So it was in Bisbee, and you guys went out.
Yep. Bisbee at the Jonquil Hotel, which is this really cool, like funky hotel in Bisbee, which itself is a really cool, funky little town in southern Arizona, like pretty close to the Mexico border. And it's just like really neat. It reminds me of a mining town in like South Dakota or the Rockies. The houses and all sort of perched up on the hills and like kind of older architecture. And then it's really funky, cool hotel that's owned by our friends Sterling and Eva. And it attracts like a really cool like overland crowd and adventure motorcycle crowd that stays there. And they have like a little camping area and fire pit area out back. So it's about probably 3 hours from Phoenix, something like that.
Yeah, an hour and a half or so from Tucson, 3 hours from Phoenix.
And so that was a kind of a destination. Meetups for us are generally where we get people together at a restaurant or bar or coffee shop in close to an urban center. And it's a very low commitment thing. It's like, hey, if you want to see the gear, we'll be here between these hours. Drinks are on us. And people come down and hang out, and we just chit chat and tell stories. And people want to look at gear, they can. And sometimes we do a presentation. Whereas this was more like, hey, we're going to meet up here at this spot that's 3 hours away from Phoenix. And, there's camping. And we didn't really know, like, would people come that far? And it actually was great. I think about 40 people showed up, which was our cap for the event. And everybody camped and hung out and met a ton of people. It was just really fun, And instead of being like standing around next to mannequins, we were out like chilling and chatting, and everybody had ridden in, and I don't know, it's just like kind of a model of the type of event I think we want to do more of in the future.
Yeah, and to me, one of the really like important things about it when I'm like distinguishing the two events from each other is that at meetups we try really hard to not be rushed in conversation or like move on too quickly, to just kind of like be where you are, or I do anyway. I guess I can only speak for myself, and I know you do too. And here in this environment, it was so much easier to do that. And things just seem to go on longer. Like you could kind of savor the conversation and really be in it, not rushing off to the next thing. which I think is so valuable.
And there's a lot more communication between riders, like with each other, instead of like the meetup tends to be more us talking to people talking to us. And this was like everybody talking to everybody, you know?
Yeah, they had, and not, I mean, having the gear there at an actual physical meetup versus, you know, having the gear there and then everybody's got their bikes and they're talking setup or whatever it is, or, you know, talking about what oil they should run, you know, what tire pressures and all that other stuff. I mean, yeah, I could see where that dynamic is much better in a foreign setting or in a setting somewhere outside of the coffee shop, the bar,
yeah.
I think everyone's just more relaxed. Like everybody there seemed more relaxed. We were all more relaxed because it's a place that's familiar to us, you know, like
it's our natural habitat.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, so the reason that hasn't really worked for us in the past is that usually on the weekends we have other events scheduled, you know, like big formal rallies, like the IMS shows or the BMW or KTM and so on. And what's happening now is that the IMS tour, which went from an indoor event series to an outdoor event series, and then just kind of went away. And so that's freed up all of our weekends. So suddenly, you know, we couldn't really do weekend events before because we had conflicts, you know, and now we have weekends open. And so we can plan a tour that's like, you know, basically meet up, weekend camp out, meet up, weekend camp out. And how fun for us to be out camping and hanging out in cool spots and actually riding instead of standing in a convention center in a booth, you know?
Well, and I mean, the question for both of you guys, so knowing that now, right, after doing this first, you know, this meetup style versus one of those shows, I feel like I already know the answer to this, but which would you prefer?
Definitely. We haven't come up with the official name for this, but our brainstorming led us in the car the other day to call. Should we say it?
Let's wait.
Okay. We don't have to talk
okay, full.
We don't even know. We're just so excited about it. We're talking to the team about it later this week.
Okay.
Yeah, leave it for them, and then we'll come back.
For now, we'll call it a dirty meetup.
All right.
So I definitely 1000% would choose the dirty meetup. I mean, even just going off of the sheer like sanitary environment of being in a convention center or the parking lot of a convention center or, you know, a fairgrounds or something like that is just so very different than these locations that we have in mind for these dirty meetups. And it just feels so much more funky and so much more Mosko, and like I said, more our natural habitat. It's
really I think because like with motorcycles, you know, not the whole concept of like an ADV motorcycle event is a little bit weird because like mostly we ride motorcycles to be out in the woods, like away from large congregations of people and to be with our you know, a couple of friends or even alone. And a motorcycle event does the opposite of that. It tends to bring everybody into one place and you end up with 400 or 500 people camped next to each other at a fairgrounds, you know, because sooner or later the event gets to a scale where you can't really do it anywhere except the fairgrounds. And so that's been always kind of a dilemma for us just in general, you know, is that the activity itself is kind of a solo and small group activity. So we're going to try to find a balance for that in terms of the scale and the locations of these things.
Yeah, I think there's something cool. There is something cool about bringing all of those people together who normally like would just be going out on their own into nature and getting them. I think that even people who attend the events, there's something about that discomfort that they like. Like it might be why they do it, you know, that it's like, oh, okay, like I know I'm going to bump into people and have to talk to people or make new friends. And that's part of the process. But I think we can do that on a smaller scale and bring the quality. I don't want to say the quality of the like masses is low, but maybe we'll have higher quality people that like more enjoy engaging with each other at these events. I think that's totally feasible, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people want to meet they do want to ride. Like a lot of times people may not have a lot of close friends when they first get into the sport that are super into it. And this is a way for them to connect with other people that know where to go and what to do.
Yeah, and they're not, you know, you see, like I've done in previous work history, I've done like the SEMA show. And that's, you know, industry only and blah, blah, blah. But you end up talking to so many people and there's no way you could connect with all of those people, you know, that you would at an event, something like this, where everybody's huddled around. This is like more like the event that happens after the main event.
Yeah.
Right. And the connections are more meaningful, and you can remember people's names, and there are so many good things about it. You know, it's like impossible at shows like SEMA to remember everybody's name. There's just no way.
I got a system from one of the guys that was there, one of the engineer reps that always was in the booth with us. He goes, I just put the business cards in different locations. So I know the ones in my back right pocket are the ones I actually need to follow up with.
Yeah.
I go, that's pretty smart.
Yeah, that's a pretty good system.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, okay. All right. I got this, And then later on, you're like, shit, what was I going to talk to him about?
Hey, Victor, do you want to know a pretty good trick that somebody taught me a couple of years ago about remembering names?
Yes, please.
Okay. So when you meet someone new that you want to remember their name, that's an important distinction. You don't want to remember everyone's name necessarily. There's just no space for that. But if you want to remember their name, then look at their face and envision someone else that you know who has that same name right next to them. Like literally picture their head right next to that other person's head. And I swear it works so well. My retention rate, I think, has gone up to, 98%, close to 98% with that trick. If you remember to do it, it works really well.
I'm going to have to try that, because for sure I've, meet so many people, and I've worked in customer service for years and years. So it's like, eventually you get to the point where like, okay, that's it. Brain's full.
Right.
We're getting to the end of the memory space here. That's a good trick. I'm going to try that. I'll see how that works.
Yeah, it works.
Nice. Okay. So we've been talking a lot about riding. Where was the beginning for you guys? Where'd you guys get started in riding?
You start.
Yeah, for me, it was, I started in college. My first car was a motorbike, but I didn't start driving until later than most folks, because I had spent, I actually left home when I was pretty young. I kind of ran away and got in some trouble, and was out on the road for a couple of years. And that's what Ash was alluding to earlier with the hitchhiking and the riding freights and things like that. And for me, when I finally got to a point where, I was ready to, I'd hitchhiked up to Alaska one summer to work in the fish canneries up there. And I came back with some money, and I was with a buddy of mine and his Blazer, and there was a motorcycle for sale on the side of the street with a cardboard sign just kind of leaning up against it for $350. It was a Honda, like a 1970s Honda CB554, which today would probably be worth thousands, but at the time was not quite as desirable of a collector's item as it is now. And it was $350, so I bought it, and I didn't even know how to ride it home. And I ended up having to go back with a friend who didn't know how to ride a motorbike, and she rode it and I rode on the back, and then she gave me some lessons, and that was the beginning of my motorcycling career. So that was back in the early 90s.
All right. And here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, it started. So for me, that the motorcycling really picked up right where the freight trains and hitchhiking left off. Like, I don't think I ever rode a freight train after getting on a motorbike, and I started using that bike to go all over the Western U.S. And then eventually I went up to like an 1100, and so that for me was kind of like it was that same travel bug, just like translated to a different tool,
Somewhere you had a little bit more control over it.
Yeah, a little bit more control. I mean, at the end of the day, despite like the romance on hopping freights and hitchhiking, which is, real, and they have some redeeming qualities, but they're both like pretty slow, dirty, frustrating ways to get around, and risky. But not that motorcycles are exactly the safest alternative. But like, freight trains involves a lot of waiting around. You're like totally exposed to elements. It's noisy, it's dangerous. And, it's like, it takes a while to get places on freight trains. And then hitchhiking, you have the risk of getting in the vehicles with just people you don't know, That's always weird. And sometimes it turns out great, but sometimes it turns out weird.
Yeah. Lack of conversation and just questionable silence.
I could go on and on about the funny things happening with hitchhiking. But also you can sit outside for long, long periods of time without a ride. I mean, in rain and heat and sometimes you get rides right away, but sometimes it's like hours or even a day, So it's not the most efficient way to get around. And then every time you walk up to a car, you're like, I wonder how this one's going to go.
What do you want from me?
Yeah. What's the exchange rate on this one?
Yeah,
exactly. But I mean, that's a long time ago. We're talking 30 years ago, more.
Nice.
I was chuckling to myself when you said something about that is not very efficient to get around on freights. And I thought, oh gosh, even just riding a train, like you think, oh, I'll ride a train. It's nice and romantic. You're like, whoa, it's going to take a long time not riding a train.
Yeah. And there are some really cool things about it. Like, don't get me wrong, but it is, motorcycles are a hell of a lot better. Yeah. And you're limited to a track or with hitchhiking to a highway,
True. The only thing I would say, like maybe on the train that relates to the motorcycle, is you go into places that are not traveled by car that you wouldn't normally necessarily see.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. No, you definitely do. And it takes you well off the road track. And in fact, sometimes the trains will stop in like remote areas to let another train pass, and you kind of hop off and poke around and explore a little bit while you wait for it to fire up again. And yes, you can see old railroad camps from long time ago, that are, because the highway kind of diverges from the tracks. And so the tracks are going through an area where it just doesn't get much foot traffic.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. But definitely. I mean, I'm just trying to picture it. It was just, I'm going to say a lot of fun, but I mean, I'm sure it has its moments, but I think it's just the fun in the discovery of it.
Yeah. And for me at that age, I mean, I was 15 when I left. So, I mean, I was young. Yeah. That period of time was like 15 to 17. And everything was exciting, at that time. I was seeing the country for the first time.
Yeah. That's a big world at that age. Very big.
Yeah. It's exciting and scary. And I, there was lots of challenges and problems too. I don't want to make it sound like it was all just like, woo.
Yeah.
Grand Pete's adventure. I mean, it was tough, but it was, I look back on it as this like incredibly formative experience, and I could draw a direct line from that to what we do now.
Nice. Well, that's something I definitely want to talk, because obviously we want to know. I want to know where Mosko started and all that. But before we do that, let's talk Ash. Where did you start riding?
Yeah, I started riding when I was pretty young. My grandparents have this amazing piece of property, which is kind of where I consider having quote unquote grown up. My dad was military, so I'd spent the summers out here, and I was born in the area. But they live just outside of Yosemite, about 30 miles away from the park. And they just have this, I think it's about 80 acres or so. So it's a really nice size piece of property. And my grandfather had quad tracks all over the property. And my cousin and I, so I'm the oldest, and my cousin was a few years younger. My cousin and I got a little 50cc Honda XR. And that's where my riding started. It was, the quads were fun when I was little, but you always had to be with an adult. And so this bike was like a whole different type of machine where you could go off on your own. And my cousin and I would just scoot around for hours and hours and hours, riding onto other people's property, sometimes getting in trouble, finding woodpeckers that had pecked all the way through trees so we could see through them. Like, I just have so many childhood memories of riding around that property. And, yeah, I definitely didn't know when I was young that, because I rode dirt bikes like into my adolescence as well. And I did not know that they would play such a big role in my life. I had no idea. If you would have told me then what I do now, I never would have believed you. But I also probably would have been really stoked.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah, as a teenager, I rode dirt bikes, but it wasn't a huge part of my life. It was just something that I had done since I was little. And when I moved up, so I lied to everyone that I knew and basically said that I had a job up in Seattle. I was still finishing school, and I transferred up to a university outside of Seattle, and just, I kind of restarted. My boyfriend at the time and I went up there and both got jobs, and he ended up buying an adventure bike after he kind of had a hard time finding a job. And once he did, he bought an adventure bike. And I was like, what is this? What even is this thing? Like, I didn't understand it. I was like, it's so huge. What do you do with it? We're like, I'm used to dirt bikes, like what is this thing? And he had gone on a couple of trips, and then he took me with him on the bike. And that was not my cup of tea, but I really understood what it was about. and immediately just wanted a bike. And then kind of long story short, I ended up going to the BMW dealership, looking at, there was this Sertao that was pretty much brand new that a guy and his dad had both bought the matching bikes, and one of them ended up breaking their leg, and they totally kitted them out with all kinds of aftermarket parts. And it was just so sick. I was so in love with it. And I applied for financing and just like crossed my fingers and toes and arms and legs and everything I could think of, and got the financing on the bike. And that was like one of the happiest days of my adult life. Like, I was so excited, and it just took over all of my time, this adventure riding. I mean, I was working in a hospital, and so I'd have these shifts that were 12 hours long, 3 days a week, and I would kind of bunch them up together so that I'd get bigger chunks of time. And I was planning to go to medical school at the time, and I was just working my ass off for that, and trying to envision how I was going to stop all this riding that I was doing. So that's kind of that's how I got into adventure riding. And then when Pete and I met, I guess I was still riding that same bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's kind of the beginnings of my riding.
Where the adventure began. Pete, what was the first adventure bike for you?
The first adventure bike for me was actually the first adventure bike in the U.S. was a 1150 BMW 1150 Adventure, and that was awesome. I took it down to Baja, and I actually had that bike right up until we started Mosko. Although I had other bikes too, but I kind of kept it. And in fact, just the other day, I ran into the guy that bought it from me, and got like 60,000 miles on it now. Yeah, he's still going. I didn't rack up that many miles on it. You know, I used it mostly for dual sport trips around the Northwest and 1 or 2 trips to Baja and stuff like that. But that was my first adventure bike in the U.S. The bike that really got me fired up on riding, like touring. I was starting to do some international backpacking,
mm-hmm.
and I was in Vietnam on a trip in Hanoi, and I was like just kind of frustrated with the whole backpacker experience and backpacker world, you know, because it tends to funnel you towards other backpackers, whether that's in like hostels or on buses or like these little guided tours. You know, you sort of get somewhere and you're like, now what do I do with myself? And then the hostel has like some binder full of tour ideas that they push across at you. And you're like, well, I guess I'll go see the waterfall, or I guess I'll go do this. But it's like really structured and not very interesting, you know? And these two guys had said to me, hey, you know, you can buy motorcycles here for like $600. And it turned out you could actually buy them for quite a bit less than that. I think I paid a couple $100 for the one I bought. And I decided to get a bike and go tour around on that instead of taking the backpacker route through Southeast Asia. And man, it was so awesome. You know, I was just like totally hooked. I mean, wow, I can go anywhere, you know? And that was a Minsk. That was a 2-stroke Russian Minsk, which I think was a 125cc 2-stroke.
Nice.
You know, it broke down a lot, but like whatever, everybody there knew how to work on them. And that actually set the stage for a lot of the trips we do now. Like, you know, we just got back from doing a trip in Sierra Leone and Liberia that was like very, very similar to that in terms of like, we just showed up and bought a couple of local bikes, you know?
Yeah. No, and that, definitely, I mean, I know that was in the presentation. You guys talked about that. You know, going to these foreign countries, you know, far off places. And that's like day one is like, let's find a bike, you know, that's how we're going to do this. Not let's, you know, well, we should go see this place and that place and then figure this out. No, it's like, no, first thing we're doing is buying a bike.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hardly wait. I mean, we land and we start like, we're like, we should go to sleep. We need to like get our sleep back on track. You know, it's usually kind of like evening when we get there. And we're like, we really need to go to bed. We need to go to bed. And we both just start fiddling with our gear immediately and getting our stuff ready. Like, we can't help ourselves.
It's so exciting landing in another country, you know, where you don't know the customs, you don't speak the language, and you know, figuring out how to get a bike and like, you know, just getting out of town. And a lot of the places we travel, there's just not a ton of information, except for the major tourist destinations. So it's a pretty exciting, you know, like, and we've done a lot of this now. It's become like really a recurring theme for us. We just pick some place we want to go, fly there, buy an inexpensive local bike, usually for kind of $1,000 to $2,000 max, and sometimes for less, and go ride it around for a month and then sell it at the end and hopefully get half our money back. It's a very economical way to see the world on 2 wheels.
And I mean, it makes perfect sense, how you guys do it. I mean, I learned, I learned a lot from the presentation because, like you said, I mean, you guys have done this multiple times now. This isn't the first, second, or third trip. This is, 5-10 trips later.
Yeah, at least. I mean, we've done it all over the world. We call it brat packing, like backpacking, brat packing. Yeah.
Nice.
That's our term for it.
That's the new hashtag.
I don't think anybody else is using that term yet, but we're trying to get the word out. It's brat packing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to 68 countries, so with this episode, so I'm sure we'll get some more people using it.
You all heard it here first.
Yeah.
Brat packing.
Nice.
And that's BRAP with 2 A's if you're hashtagging.
Yeah, if you're hashtagging right.
It's not as hard as single A. Single A stuff, there's no time for the single A BRAPs.
Yeah. Okay, can I please say this just because it's fucking hilarious? And he probably won't be listening to this podcast. Maybe he will. And if he does, dude, I love you. But that was hilarious. So at the meetup when we did our presentation, do you remember the guy who was like, BRAP? I thought it was Brape.
Brop.
Yeah.
I thought it was
because of the double A's. Yes.
You were like, what?
Yeah, I do remember that. The girlfriend and I were chuckling about it.
When I walked up to him and made such a big deal of it, because I was like, what? No, come on. I kind of walked up and gave him a hard time. His face just went like a tomato. And I was like, oh shit, he was serious. I thought he was joking, making a joke about that. No, he was really serious.
But, if you've only seen things in writing, how do you know? I mean,
true.
I've made that mistake too. When I've seen things on the internet or
goes
whatever.
BRAP.
The 2 strokes. Maybe that's what we were joking. Maybe it's a 4-stroke nose.
Brop.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Was this 2 or 4-stroke? Because I think 2-stroke might be a single A.
I mean, that's the only problem with the brat packing for our international trips is that they're very rarely on 2 strokes. It's almost always 4 strokes.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway, it rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, true.
Not brop. That sounds like you're packing broths around. I mean, sometimes we do that too.
You never know. You may need one in an emergency.
Yeah.
So there is, and speaking of communication, there was something that was in the presentation that you guys gave, and I hope that you guys can do something. I would love to see. Well, I don't know. Actually, I have mixed feelings about that. That presentation that you guys did was so cool. Being there and being present for it, that part of the experience was being there and talking with you guys. That I almost kind of don't want to see it on YouTube or one of the medias where you could share it with more people. But at the same time, I do, because you guys have so much experience in what you've done. It's like I'm torn. The experience side of it versus, being there and in person versus the people need to know.
I think it would be such a different format. First of all, thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
that makes us feel really good.
Yeah, totally.
We're about to do it again at Overland Expo, and we're really excited about that. But it always feels good to know that it was valuable information for someone.
We should put in a plug for that, actually. I don't remember what time it is, though. It's on Saturday.
I have it on I can look on my phone and tell you in a second.
Yeah, Saturday at Overland Expo, sometime.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think if we did ever do that, and I'm sure we will, when we dice this up for social media or for YouTube or whatever, it will be packaged so differently that I think there would still be valuable, or there would still be value in going to a presentation.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That it would be it's just so different when you parse things up into these 60-second, 15-second, or 20-second pieces. It's so different than having someone's pretty much undivided attention for 45 minutes or an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we talk about it a lot, and it's it's one of these things where when you find something you love and you sort of instinctively want to share it with other people. And I think there is a kind of a natural barrier to entry. So it's not like giving up your favorite surf spot or something like that. I mean, for one thing, it's the entire world, and which is a large surf spot, and then also it's just there's barriers to entry in terms of time, and it's an inexpensive way to travel, but it's not free. And so there's a financial barrier to entry, and then there's also just a fear barrier to entry. A lot of people are just not comfortable with that level of uncertainty. And so I think, very, very small handful of people hear that presentation and think, I'm going to do that. And I'm always really, really happy when they come up to us, 6 months later and say, oh my God, I did it. And I had this amazing experience. That's the best feeling, but it doesn't happen all that often. But I do think for some folks, it helps them redefine the frontiers of their sort of mental frontiers of motorcycle travel and like the places you can go and the types of trips you can do. And maybe they won't necessarily fly to Liberia, but they might go to Mexico, they might go to Morocco. Yeah. They might go to the next state over, and if anything that furthers those boundaries, I think motorcycle travel, that's a big part of it is pushing your boundaries, and it doesn't really matter if your boundaries require you to fly halfway across the world or just go camping at a campground 150 miles from your house. The point is you're testing them. And that's like a big part of what I get out of it. And then the more you do it, the further those boundaries get pushed and the more sort of exotic and challenging trips you might try to do.
Yeah, one state over, one county over leads to 2 counties, leads to 1 state over, leads to 3 states over.
For sure.
And the effect is the same no matter what. It's the boundary breaking that is the point. Like you can talk to someone who just got off of a trip that went 1 state over and it was their first time and it was the most wild thing they could possibly imagine doing. And their enthusiasm and the way that their mind was expanded is the same as someone like Peter, myself, who would fly to Liberia or Sierra Leone. It's really just, and that's why we say that it sounds cliche, but, adventure means something different to everybody. And it's so true.
It means different things to us at different periods of our lives,
sure.
And so that proves it. And you can go to like another country and you're there riding a motorcycle and you're on the road with other people to your right and left, also riding motorcycles who live there. And they're buying groceries or taking their kids to school and you're having an adventure. But you're doing literally the exact same thing in the exact same place at the exact same time, but having 2 completely opposite experiences. One is having an adventure and one is having the complete opposite of an adventure. They're just going through their daily routine.
Yeah.
That's why when I have my hand up in the air, I'm doing something crazy. I'm standing dancing on my bike and we're riding through a town. People are looking at you like you're totally nuts because they're just like doing their daily chores.
Yeah. And tourist.
Yeah.
But in places that don't get tourists, you guys... there was something in the presentation that we, my girlfriend and I both talked about in the car after we left, and it was a big aha moment for me, was the communication. Nowhere near the same language. So the language barrier, but yet you guys talked about it as communicating on such a very basic level and still getting through.
For sure. And, we've become pretty somewhat adept at that. To the extent you can, just because of all the places we travel where we don't speak the same language. But it's actually much easier than people think to get around in countries where you don't speak the language. And it's not uncommon, even out in small villages, for someone to appear who actually does speak English, which is funny. That's a convenient thing about speaking English as your first language, is that people everywhere study it. But a lot of times you don't. And that's fine. And, I think for us, like we talked in the presentation about traveling to places where they don't get a lot of visitors because, in those places, people are often just as excited to see you as you are to see them. And that's like a really critical ingredient, that when you go to a place that gets a lot of foreign visitors, everybody in that area is going to be so accustomed to it that you don't really have anything to offer them except your money. Like show up, spend some money, get out is kind of the feeling. And in fact, for folks who don't benefit from the tourist business in that town, they probably regard you as an annoyance, you know? But when you're a novelty, like part of the reason we travel is for that novelty and the experience of like other cultures and meeting people. But if you're providing that same novelty to the people you're visiting, if they see you and, whoa, this is crazy. Thanks for coming to our village. And who are you? And why are you here? And, and can I take a picture with you? And it's a totally equal exchange, and that's a really nice feeling, but you don't get it in areas that see a lot of tourist traffic.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think helps with that.
To your point, though, about the deep communication without that's so far beyond like just verbally communicating. There was a little girl on this trip, and her name was Princess. I did get that out of her. I try really hard when we get somewhere to like learn about, 60 to 80 words, like really basic words that will help me kind of at least get the first few sentences out of the way in a conversation with someone new. And so I was able to ask her what her name was. Her name was Princess, and she was so cute. And she was like she wanted to watch me, and she was washing her clothes, and she was doing it from like far enough away. Like, not that she was scared per se, but just that it wasn't like intruding on what I was doing. And I invited her over closer. And so she gladly picked up her bucket, ran over to where I was, continued washing her clothes. I asked her if I could help her, like just by using my hands and my face. You don't have to actually say anything. Mm-hmm. And it was really sweet. We washed her clothes together, and then we laid them out in the sun. And I think then she decided it was enough, and she came back over for a visit later, gave her some cookies, and we went about our business. But it's those like fleeting interactions sometimes that are sometimes just the sweetest and the best. And like Pete said, the curiosity. I mean, I have this one of my favorite memories of interacting with people on our motorcycle trip was in Ethiopia a few years ago, where we were visiting in these tribal villages that are in the very, very south of the country. It's called the Omo Valley. And so we're in the Omo Valley, and these women were so curious about me because it was like my markings. They do a lot of body modification. And my tattoos and my piercings were just so fascinating to them. And they kind of even pulled me aside and like were wanting to like look at my entire body and like inspect for any other tattoos or piercings. And they were even able to ask me like if I had children or not. And we weren't speaking I don't even know what language they speak, So yeah, you can have these really valuable, meaningful interactions.
We've never. And where was this at? Where in the world was this at? I have to ask that because you guys have been everywhere. So
yeah, that was in Ethiopia.
Hey, Ethiopia, okay. And that was the same with Princess.
No, Princess
was in Sierra Leone.
Yeah, we should explain with Princess that they both Sierra Leone and Liberia, their English is kind of an official language there, but it's like a totally modified version of English. In Sierra Leone, it's Creole, and Sierra Leone has a heavy British influence, and then Liberia has a heavy American influence.
And so, like when I asked her, "What's your name?" I said, "What's your name? What's your name?" That's how you say like, "What's your name?"
And how do you say "What's up"?
Adibody.
Adibody. Which it comes from.
And then you say, "Adibody, fine yourself."
So that says Adibody is how's the body, and then you say back, the body's fine.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Nice.
But Liberia was founded by Americans, and so the English had basically freed slaves from the U.S. That resettled there, and so that's where the English language that's spoken there derives from.
Gotcha. So there that connection. But still, it's if you're not used to speaking or hearing that, obviously it's still, even though I was like, that kind of sounds like that's me with Italian and speaking Spanish. Kind of sounds like it, but no, I know if I say that, I might get into trouble.
Oh man, we were like, this is gonna be great. We could just talk to everybody. They speak English there. No. Like as soon as we arrived at the airport, we were like,
we have questions.
Like if you're just speaking English, they can't understand anything hardly, that you're saying.
Yeah, but
most people, really well-educated people in both of those countries, will understand your English people and be able to speak English back to you.
Yeah. You find English speakers pretty easily there, but it's pretty interesting.
That was us in Puerto Rico a few months ago. I go, they speak Spanish, but then it was like they're like, huh?
Oh, cool. Yeah, different Spanish in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, socks, huh? What are socks?
Yeah, one of my best friends is Puerto Rican, and it's very different.
Yeah, and you think you're like, oh, okay, I got this. No, you don't. So, all right, let's rewind it a little bit. But so, where did Mosko Moto start in all of this?
Mosko started back in 2013. I was, at the time, I had been involved in another business that I sort of exited, and I was very burned out. That business had a really tough go of it after the heavy recession hit in 08, 09. When I exited it, I was very happy to exit it. Like I was burned out. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was doing a lot of international motorcycle travel before. For like about 10 years before that, I'd been doing the trips, starting with that Vietnam trip. It's sort of gotten bigger and bigger and more interesting. And so that was kind of my, hobby, but it had nothing to do with my business. And so the first thing I did after exiting that business was I decided I was going to ride to Central America or maybe South America. I didn't know. I was just going to go south. So I had a 950 Super Enduro, and I loaded it up, and I had made the transition from hard luggage to soft luggage quite a while before that. I just got tired of like breaking my panniers every time I went on an adventure trip, and so I switched over to soft luggage, and I decided to take soft luggage on that trip because my goal was to, at least through Central America, try to spend as much time off road as possible, and that's what I did. I kind of embarked on this journey, and right away on the trip, I do a lot of other sports too, like skiing and mountain biking and backpacking, and I was on that. I headed out on that trip with the soft luggage, and right away I was kind of like, man, I feel like there's a better version of these bags. Like they just seem so simple compared to the bags that I use in other sports, and for an equivalent price of what you might see in a backpacking pack at REI, but the bag was so much less sophisticated. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of networked my way into a connection at Dakine, which at the time was one of our major employers here in the Gorge. They're a major bag making company that was owned by Billabong. Then it had originally been founded by a couple entrepreneurs, and then they sold it to Billabong. And so Billabong owned it, but Billabong's in Australia. The company was headquartered in the Gorge. And I because of that, there were a lot of the kind of bag making. There's a lot of bag making expertise, sort of a cluster of expertise around the Gorge. Between prototypers and factories that come here to visit, and designers and graphic designers, and just all the kind of ecosystem that supports a substantial business like Dakine. And so I was able to network my way into a contact to Andrew, who's now my business partner. At the time, he was the senior technical bag designer at Dakine, and he rides too. And so I started communicating with him on email while I was riding down to Central America about like, hey, I was sending him pictures of the bags and some ideas for like a duffel with backpack straps and a pannier that maybe mounted to the bike. Like in the same way with backpacks, you have like frameless backpacks, like the classic rucksack. Mm-hmm. And then you have like frame backpacks that have more structure and better weight distribution. Could there be some version of that would work for, motorcycle pannier and of a frame pack? You know what I mean? Those were a couple of the original ideas, was like a duffel with backpack straps that turns into a duffel, and where the straps don't go over the opening, the main opening. So like a top-down duffel, you strap it down, but that you can't get into it during the day. Mm-hmm. And so there were a few kind of core ideas that came up in that exchange, but it was all off in the future because I was off on this motorcycle trip and nobody really knew where or when it was going to end, least of all me. So I was riding south and I got into Honduras. And everybody told me like, oh, just skip Honduras. It's dangerous. It's not that interesting or whatever. Which for me, it just made it seem even more interesting. And I got there and I met a really cool guy named Gerardo at the border in Copan who had a business there. He told me about the Mosquito Coast, this like sort of remote area in northeastern Honduras that up against the border with Nicaragua. He said, hey, I used to do adventure tours there by boat. And I think you could get through there with a motorcycle, even though there's not roads. And, maybe it would be an interesting challenge. And I kind of hung out with him for the night at his coffee shop there. And he sketched out some thoughts for me on maps. And I kind of followed his directions, which were like, hey, go to this town and then follow this dirt road and it dead ends at a beach. And you're going to ride like 50 miles down the beach. And then it's going to hit a river mouth and there'll be boats at the river mouth and so on and so forth. And I could work my way down to Nicaragua. And so, that's what I did. I headed out there and it was a really interesting experience. It doesn't get a whole lot of people traveling through the Mosquito Coast because it's sort of out of the way, and there's no roads. And so I headed out on this thing and I ended up getting in this horrendous accident in the middle of the Mosquito Coast. Like I like probably about 40 or 50 miles from the Nicaragua border, I crashed and I broke my leg, and it was a big problem and I had to get out of there. And, I was evacuated, did a medevac back to the U.S., had surgery in Miami, and then bam, just like that, I was back in the Gorge. And I kind of went over, I called up Andrew and was like, hey, dude, guess what? I'm back. You want to talk about that bag idea we had, And I was still on crutches and on painkillers and stuff, but we got together and kind of hatched the hatched the plan to start developing the bags, and that led into the business about a year later. So that was the original kind of founding story of Mosko. And in fact, we spent that year developing the bags, and I recovered from my injury and healed up. And the following winter, we had prototypes that we'd sewn here in the U.S. of what's now the backcountry pannier and backcountry duffel. But we had nowhere to test them because it was winter in the gorge and there was snow and ice on the ground. And so we had to go somewhere warm. And I was like, well, I have this bike sitting on this Honduran army base out in the middle of the Mosquito Coast. Maybe I could fly down with the prototypes and strap them to the bike and finish the trip because I need to get that bike anyway. I need to get it back to the U.S. anyway. And so that became the first testing trip. I flew down there and took a series of progressively smaller flights to get out to this town, Puerto Lempira, in the Mosquito Coast. And then from there, got a ride in a side-by-side to the bike and then took the bike and rode it down to Panama. It was like probably 400-something miles, I think, from where the bike was to the pavement. And then on the pavement, I just kind of took the main thoroughfares with a few detours on the way down to Panama, put the bike on a plane and flew it home. And the bags worked out great. The mounting system worked out great. Everything worked great. So when we got back, we said, oh, what are we going to call the company? Because we were ready to go into production, and we had to pick a name and a logo. And we liked doing something related to the Mosquito Coast. But Mosquito Coast is kind of wordy. And so we shortened it to Mosko because they call it La Mosquitia down there with a K. But it was just sort of feminine. And so we just kind of came up with Mosko. It's like a combination of La Mosquitia and Mosquito Coast.
And what about the wrestler?
And there's a professional wrestler called El Mosko de Tijuana, but Mosko with a Mosco, not a K. So that actually factored into the conversation as well. El Mosko de Tijuana, and then we picked the lizard because the lizard lives in the Mosquito Coast. The basilisk lizard lives in the Mosquito Coast.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. Wait, how did we go from then, Moskos or, mosquito to, to a lizard? But okay.
Yeah. They're the lizard, because, we looked at mosquitoes, we wanted something from the natural world and we didn't want to have like a piston or a cog, we wanted something that was natural and organic and, more kind of like reflecting our identity as an outdoor and nature company more so than like, hardcore motorsports. And so that's the direction we were headed. And then the basilisk lizard, they call it the Jesus Christ lizard because it runs so fast. It runs across the surface of the water. It doesn't sink, it just like skips across it. We're like, cool, here's a little critter from the Mosquito Coast that goes like super fast and doesn't get wet. Yeah. And so, that's how we chose that.
More or less waterproof.
Yeah, waterproof, I guess, because he doesn't stink.
Yeah.
Fortunately, with riding, if you go faster, you get more wet through the water.
Yeah, you don't need to peel back too many layers on that. I mean,
oh no, I'm not saying it's part of making sense. I was commenting in general.
Cute little logo. We like him, the little critter.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Nice. Very nice.
We better like him. He's tattooed on both of our bodies.
Yeah, but Ash and I both have basilisk lizard tattoos.
Nice.
And actually, we weren't the first people to get basilisk Mosko tattoos. There are two friends of ours and other riders that got them first.
There we
Believe
go.
it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have actually 2 tattoo shops just across the street from Mosko. So I'm just making this as a public announcement that we will pay for your tattoo if you get a tattoo of a basilisk lizard.
Nice.
We will pay for it.
There we go.
Not that anyone's going to take us up on that. And while we're making announcements, our presentation is at 1:00 at Overland Expo.
Oh, the presentation is 1:00 Saturday, Overland Expo.
Okay, so Overland Expo, and is it this weekend already?
Yes, this weekend.
Flagstaff,
Saturday.
Okay.
Yep.
Saturday,
Flagstaff.
1:00, Flagstaff.
Yep.
Nice.
Meet you there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that place, for as I always say, those playing the home game. I mean, I've been there twice. The second time was definitely an adventure. I actually rode out, didn't drive out, rode my F800 out there solo. Just picked my goal was not a single freeway. And on the way out, it didn't work out. But on the way back, I was like, I'm not taking a single freeway on the way back. I'm going to literally pick all these. And I saw Jerome and all these little, mining towns and skirting thunderstorms and these, because I ended up having to leave early because of weather that was coming in. And I'm like, well, I am a fair weather rider, so this is my time to leave. And yeah, I mean, it ended up, you know, like you guys were saying, adventure is a little bit different for everybody, but that was the first time I had done such a long solo ride, you know, and was like, you know, I'm on a traveled road, maybe not thoroughly traveled, but if I break down, somebody eventually will come along, and I've got enough stuff to camp. So let's see where this goes. And the whole event was just amazing. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that it's a great event. It's one of our favorites of the year. And it's become huge. You know, a lot of the growth has been on the 4x4 side, not the adventure motorcycle side, but it's still, even just as an adventure motorcycle event, still a large one in the context of other events in the country. And a lot of the overland people cross over to ADV as well. There's a lot of crossover. A lot of ADV people have overland vehicles. A lot of overland folks have ADV bikes or dual sport bikes strapped to the back. So
yeah,
it's fun. You know, it's a lot of like gear to geek out on. I don't remember how many vendors it is, but it's huge.
Yeah.
You know,
it takes a while to walk through it for sure. And then, a lot of the show too is wandering through the campsites and looking at the vehicles of the attendees, you know? And then you see the earth roamers and some of these others like,
oh yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, there's definitely some wild stuff. And so what's next for the company? I mean, you guys just recently went into apparel, right? Getting into the gear.
It seems recent, maybe to the outside world, but it doesn't seem too recent to us. We started. I mean, we're coming up on our 4th season in apparel, so 4th year, and we worked on it for probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before that. I mean, we started designing apparel almost before we even had our first bag in inventory. So it was a long lead in. Apparel is just like a very long game. I mean, actually, anybody can kind of draw a picture of a jacket, send it off to a factory, and be in business 12 or 18 months later. But to build these really complicated, high quality garments, what we do, and for the motorcycle world, is like totally a different story. I mean, it just takes forever. You know, there's a lot of relationship building with the factories and the vendors, a lot of research, a lot of design, a lot of prototyping. You got to, try a lot of things, fail, start over. And we did all of that. So we've been working on apparel almost as long as we've been working on bags, but we didn't actually release it until probably 5 years later.
Yeah.
And then this will be our 4th season. And so we started with bags, and then we did apparel, and we're still, the apparel is still very much in the kind of expansion phase. And then we're just getting into body armor. So, one of the things, all of our apparel is designed to work with separate body armor, so it doesn't have integrated armor pockets like a lot of motorcycle jackets do. And there's a lot of benefits to that. For example, you can take your jacket off and still have armor protection. So when it's hot out, you get much better airflow and ventilation. So for off-road riding, for serious off-road riding, everybody uses separate body armor. And as adventure and dual sport starts to shift a little bit more in that direction, we think that's where other folks are going to go. But regardless, that's how we do it. So we're designing the kind of gear that we personally use and our friends. And so that, though, then immediately begs the question, well, okay, what do I do for armor? If you're talking to someone who's migrating from an integrated armor garment, they need to figure out their armor solution. And so we've worked with a couple companies for the last several years as we developed our apparel line, but now we're going to start doing our own. That is like totally designed to go with our apparel,
Nice.
And we're partnered with a company in the UK called Rayon Labs that has just a really neat patented armor technology that's like totally unlike anything that we've seen in motorcycle before. So it's going to be pretty special. Yeah. But that's another one of these big, long, slow development process. And there's a lot of molds involved, technology, and, it's a long, slow process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, trying to get it right and fitting comfortably. And I mean, the gear is designed, at least when I picture, first of all, I subscribe to that. I like wearing armor separate from the jacket because, if it gets hot and I usually run warm, I want to be able to take the jacket off, but still have the armor that I chose to wear that day and not have to compromise in that. So I feel like that totally makes sense. But getting it just right, because I know I won't use certain elbow guards because the fit of it isn't quite, Like it works, it gets the job done, but it's not something that I'm going to want to ride, starting at 7 a.m. and going into the dark, all day long.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of body armor is designed a lot of off-road body armor is designed to be worn for relatively short periods. It's not designed to be lived in, the way we live in it. So that's a pretty common experience with off-road body armor when you're wearing it all day, every day. I mean, to me, it's still way better than integrated armor in terms of both the protection and then the comfort of being able to take your jacket off. And most people, when they finally make the switch, just have this like aha moment. And you typically find that you start wearing your jacket less and less, and until eventually you're just putting it on when it's cold and wet, or you're getting on pavement and you want the abrasion protection.
Yeah.
But for dirt, there's just no reason. I mean, you got people out there riding in the desert in 100-degree temperature, 0% chance of rain, and they're wearing rain gear. It's crazy. Like, it's the only sport I'm aware of where people wear their rain gear even when it's not wet, even when it's not raining. I mean, you could say maybe skiing, but skiing, you're still surrounded by frozen water. You're in snow, So most sports, when it stops raining, you take your rain gear off.
Yeah, usually. Or if it's motorsports, a lot of them just put the put the car away. But no, you're right. And this is, we've talked, I've had different people on the podcast, and we've talked about different things to set up the bike to make it comfortable to ride all day long. Suspension, things like the counter shock, and all these little comforts and mental games that you play with yourself to make sure you're fresh. But the gear is definitely one of the largest impacts. How much stuff you're packing and carrying on yourself versus putting on the bike. All of these things add up to how well you're going to be doing in the afternoon and not making mistakes and all this stuff. So I see what you guys are saying. You have to take into consideration in as far as design goes and wearability and when to use these things.
For sure.
So nice. Well, I think, let's see, I was trying to think, there was one other, so what is, are we going to start doing some of these fireside chats and doing more of these events, meetup styles that you guys were talking about earlier?
Yeah, no question. Definitely. I mean, with the IMS tour kind of disappearing, at least for this year, we don't know if that's forever. Can't make any statements about that. But the IMS at this point has no further plans of putting on events. So with that in mind, definitely we will be planning a tour of these weekend dirty meetups, name to be announced soon.
The dirty meetups is not terrible either. No, that's been our internal name for a while.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's not the best.
Well, we did get brat packing already, so
Yeah, true.
Yeah, we like coming up with words.
Yeah,
and names. I think events are just hugely important to us. And I think as a direct selling company, finding, it's a little bit like in the old days, if you were in some town and you were like a shoemaker and you wanted to sell your shoes in the next town over, you had to load up your cart, take your shoes over there and put them on display, and that was before retail and distribution and wholesale and all that stuff. And direct selling is kind of back to the future. If you want anybody to know about you, you got to go out and do it. And we like traveling, we're going around the country and meeting people and camping and riding. It's just going to be, I think it works on both sides. It works for the business and it works for the people in the business and it works for the riders and the customers that want to come check stuff out. And so I feel like it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a long time. And so this having our weekends freed up is actually, I think, going to turn out to be a great opportunity to change the way we're doing things. Yeah.
And like, to me, I'm just picturing in my mind is like, okay, if we had, seeing the pictures and everything that you guys had was really cool, right at the presentation that you guys did here at Midnight Animal. But now I'm thinking like, okay, what would that have looked like around this, big ass bonfire and everybody just hanging out and talking and listening to the story, that you guys have of your experiences. The connection is very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And we'll still do the other meetups too. I think we do both. It's just like people we have to work around people's schedules, and during the week people are working. And so they're available from, 5 p.m. or from kind of 3 p.m. to say 7 to 9 ish. And then on the weekends, they're more available to ride and camp and do other stuff. And so we'll try to structure our event tour around those demands,
Nice. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. So where do we have to go to find this information when you guys start doing this, or how do we follow along on your adventures?
Yeah, we'll be, so as the rest of our event schedule for the year unfolds and we make some decisions here in the next coming weeks, we'll definitely be sharing it on social media. And then also we've really improved our events page on our website recently, where there's now like an interactive map and you can kind of browse around the map and look at when events are coming up. So just on our website is another great place. But in the coming weeks, like I said, we'll get that out there on social. So
cool.
Make sure to share it with everyone.
And you can find us on social, on Instagram. The company is at Mosko Moto. And then Ash and I personally are at Mosko Ash and at Mosko Pete. And we're real active on social. And you can also sign up for our newsletter on the website as well. So there's a bunch of different ways. We got the events section of the website. We've got Mosko's social, Pete and Ash social, and then the newsletter.
Nice.
Or not newsletter. It's not really a newsletter. It's more the blog. Just sign up for our email list. Okay. We won't spam you. Yeah.
And if it is, it'll be travel related and actually worth it. The spam you actually want.
Yeah.
Nice. And that, I mean, that's cool. I'm on the website right now and taking a look around, and this is awesome. Super interactive. Cool. So, man, you guys really do have a stacked schedule.
Yeah,
we do, man. We're just kind of constantly on the move.
But that's good. I mean,
so that's how we like it, man. We set it up this way, and and now we're living it. And it's not perfect, there's challenges with being gone so much, and we miss our dogs, and we love our house, but and we love a lot of our sports at home and stuff like that, kite surfing, mountain biking, all the things that we do when we're not on bikes. So, we're always looking for the balance, just like anybody.
Fun and work, except I could see with something like this, the line blurs a little bit. Oh, you mean I have to go ride?
There is no line.
Yeah, there's no line.
First of all, no line. There is no line.
No, there is no line. We love what we do. We do what we love. We love the people we work with. They're our friends. Everything is fully integrated.
Nice.
And that's also not perfect. Sometimes that creates challenges too. But we work through them just like anything. I mean, it's a neat way to live, Yeah.
Well, wait, what's that? Pick something you'll love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how accurate that is though.
I'm really not sure about that either.
It's a lot of work. I mean, it's that, they say like type 2 fun, the kind of fun you got to work for. And it's fun in the sense of accomplishment. There's a lot of that kind of work with what we do. Yeah. It doesn't mean you just wake up like some, every day it's just like, and now I get to do this. It's not like that. There's a lot of hard work building a business but it's rewarding and it's something to be proud of, and it, feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine one of these days I'll figure it out. I'm just doing this till Spotify calls with the multi-million-dollar contract and says, we'll just pay for you to go to these events.
Well, let's hope that's coming. We got our fingers crossed for you.
There you go. I appreciate it. Well, and actually, there was something I want to say. Your social media post, Pete, on the stuff that recently you've been doing with the beacon stuff, so the Garmin InReach and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That is super awesome. I used to race direct for the Baja Rally. And I saw all sorts of stuff with those things. And even in the adventure world, I still see people putting them on the bikes. And I'm like, well, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I did that series. That was the first time I ever tried. I'm pretty new. I've just been engaging with social really for the last kind of 5 or 6 months in a serious way. And that was the first time I'd done kind of a series on one topic, and have any kind of affiliation with Garmin. I mean, everybody knows what my affiliation is. It's with Mosko. But, I just have done so many company trips at this point and group rides, and then also just Ash and I, and we've been through several rescues for ourselves and for other people using the devices. And, it's just like a handful of really basic things that are just kind of get maybe hidden in the product manual or something like that people don't just totally absorb. And I just felt like I wanted to communicate some of that stuff. So that was the origin of those videos, and people can check them out on my Instagram, Mosko Pete.
Mosko Pete, yeah. And it's it's definitely worth a check. I mean, I've seen like spot trackers or whichever, but I've seen personal locating beacons in a Ziploc bag in the interior pocket of their riding backpack that they were using.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'd love to see you activate that,
Yeah.
That's really special.
Actually, no. Please don't get yourself into a situation where you need to activate that, because there's going to be issues.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're using ours constantly. Like we have it with us all the time. Like not just for because we're on bikes so much. So we're so familiar with them, and it's easy to forget that like a lot of folks just they might go out for 2 week-long trips in a year, or 1 week-long trip in a year, and then a few weekend rides and their inReach mostly stays off and sort of collects dust. And so they kind of get out there and realize that it's not, they don't know how to work it, or, just like some of the things I talked about in the tips, just a few simple things that would make life a lot easier, that we take for granted because we're on ours and using them so frequently. But then having watched people try to sort it out when they're out of cell service with no internet and there's no one to ask. That was the point of those that 9-part series, was just like, hey, here's some very simple tips, that anybody can do and reduce the chance of a situation like that occurring.
No, and I mean, that's so helpful. I mean, it literally, because it's unfortunate that people are going to find out at the wrong time that they don't know how to use it, or they don't know what's going on. Or I even at the Get On ADV, I left it on. So the next morning I go on this ride and the thing's no battery. I'm all like, dude, that's such a rookie mistake. But
everybody's done that. Everybody's done that. Yeah. Have a way to keep it charged.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So eventually we'll get it. But awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys spending time and getting on the show with me, or on the podcast. And dude, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at more events. And I'm definitely going to sign up for one of these. Is it Dirty Camping? Dirty meetups?
Dirty meetups.
Dirty new name, though.
Dirty, yeah, we'll get it. Yeah, I definitely want to know the name. I'm curious as to what that's going to be.
Nice. Cool. Thanks so much for having us, Victor. And I guess we'll look forward to the next time that we see you and the next time we're on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll be.
Thanks a lot, Victor.
Keeping up with you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Right on, man.
Thank you, Ash. Yeah, thank you guys. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you soon.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you. See you. Bye. All right. So that was Mosko Pete and Mosko Ash. So talking a little bit about Mosko Moto and the bags and the history and where they started and all the rides. And we definitely talked at length about the traveling that they have done. And obviously, I mean, all of this is and continue to do. But if you have the chance to go to one of the meetups and listen to the presentations or the Dirty Camping, what's coming up, and you get a chance to listen and talk to them, the stories that they have of these travels and everything that they have done, like they honestly, when I worked at San Diego BMW Motorcycles, right, a lot of people would come in and they would buy the adventure motorcycles because of stories that they have, stories that people have lived and done what they do. And so to hear those stories from somebody else and being able to, right then and there, not being on YouTube and it being somebody in some studio somewhere far away or some groomed, with cameramen and multi-million-dollar productions. But no, you're like literally in a coffee shop listening to them talk about their adventures that they just got done doing. And so it really struck a chord with us, and it was something like it was definitely inspiring, right? You start looking like, okay, well, can we do this? And you start thinking about it. But I was blown away. And I mean, not only that, I mean, the gear and everything that they've done, I mean, you can tell that there's the blood, sweat, and tears have been put into it, and the design and the thoughtfulness of it, and how it works and how it straps and I mean, it's just, it's there. So I highly encourage you guys to jump on the Mosko Moto website. I'm going to put a link in the description for you guys to check it out. I will link the website, and then I'll link directly to the map of where they're having their meetups, so that you guys can check that out and get on there and get out to one of these events. And if you're in the Flagstaff area this weekend, jump over to the Overland Expo. They're going to be doing their presentation at 1:00 on Saturday. Definitely, it has to be. You got to see it. Like, it's got to be on the list. And just reach out and talk to them. I mean, it's really, really cool working with a company that everybody's just super cool. If you hang out at these events with them and you just even spend a little bit of time looking at the gear, you'll see the team and how they interact with each other. And so it's a really good company. And it's like almost friends first, company second. And I think that that's a really, really cool thing in the industry. You don't see that often anymore. But anyway, that is a wrap for episode 71 of the Chasing Waypoints podcast. Man, we're past 50, on our way to 100. That's crazy. But still, I still have to figure out, where are we going to do episode 100? I'm sure there's a long list of places that we could go. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Comment, share, like, subscribe. If you enjoyed the episode, I know I say this in the outro anyway, but if you enjoyed the episode, share the episode, talk to your friends about it, learn something new. Again, I mentioned this in the last episode that we did with Matt Sutherland. We're probably going to be revisiting the starting from zero, getting into Rally Raid series as well. Getting back on that. We've got some stuff coming for this next year's events that are coming up. So really excited. I am absolutely stoked. It is riding season. We're back. It's starting to get warmer. We're getting out. I'm a fair weather rider. I'm sorry. For those of you guys on the East Coast and up in the Pacific Northwest and all these places where it rains and it's cold, and you guys, right? Hats off to you guys for doing it. I just can't do it. It gets under 50 degrees here, in the 40s, high 40s, and it's time for the bike to go away. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people laughing at me right now somewhere, but you know what? It's all right. Like they said, adventure is different for everybody. Anyway, with that being said, I hope you guys are having a great week. You guys will hear this on Sunday. I will be on the road headed back from the Baja Rally training event with the American Rally Originals. But I will be listening in the car as well to this. So anyway, with that being said, guys, have a great week. Shiny side up, and we'll see you soon. All right, that is the wrap for the Chasing Waypoints podcast this week. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you heard. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a bunch of others. Also, follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook under Chasing Waypoints, Instagram Chasing Waypoints _official, and of course, the YouTube under Chasing Waypoints. Hope everybody has a good week. We will see you guys for the next episode. Remember, shiny side up, and don't forget to tag us. We want to see where you guys are riding and what you guys are up to. Have a great week.